Well, to kind of start off things, Fred, do you mind if we jump into your time at Columbia University and what
Sure.
your fondest experiences were there? We've interviewed a few people from there, so
Oh, really?
yeah,
Who did you,
Lauren Wolkstein and Chris Radcliffe,
Oh.
and I just respect the program. I'd love to know what your fondest memories were because you got your master's there.
Yes, I was. Columbia was really my first foray into film, like seriously, because I come from an engineering background, and that's what I trained as, like an engineer in France. And then I decided to make a clean break because I always loved film, but it was just, how it is, like you. Family pressure, society pressure, you're like, oh, I should be an engineer. And then suddenly I was like, no, really, that doesn't feel right. I want to go to film school. And so I applied to Columbia and they let me in. And I learned everything there. I mean, it was an amazing experience for me. They teach you sort of the basics of drama, which is very important. It's a very sort of writing focus program, and I had a great time. It was actually it was great to also create a little bit of a network because all the people that went to school with me now a lot of them make documentaries, a lot of them are making their first feature films. So it's great to be able to sort of feel part of a community.
It's very nice. Your director's statement that comes with the press kit, you have a very good quote, and both my parents are South African, so I would love to know, do you read JM, or did you fall in love with that quote, or where'd that come from?
That quote I fell in love with. I don't actually read, I haven't read that book, but when I was doing research, my friend Omar Barada, who's the voice of Christian Dior in the film, suggested that I read a book by Marina Warner called Phantasmagoria. And because I was telling him about the legacy of Dior and thinking about making him a ghost, and I was also asking Omar, like, would you like to be the voice of the ghost? And he's like, oh, my friend Marina Warner wrote a book about ghosts and the birth of cinema and sort of the links between photography and spectral sort of spirits. The old idea that the camera steals the soul. She talks about a lot in the book, and she talks about how films are essentially sort of ghostly appearances, So that's where I took the quote from. I think it's beautiful. I was interested in not only ghosts but also mirrors, and the idea that one person can be the mirror image of another person, or what is the relationship that one person has with their public image. Raf notoriously is a camera-shy person, and Christian Dior was a camera-shy person. And Christian Dior talks about his relationship with his public image. So I was interested in all these questions, and then I think eventually the film is about the relationship you have with yourself, and because that's what the creative process is about. At least for me, I don't know, but I feel it very strongly that it's very introspective, the creative process. And so I feel it even more now that we're releasing the film, and in the US, everyone sees you, and and then you talk about the film, you feel very exposed. It's almost like people hold up a mirror up to your face, and they throw back an image of what you've done, and it's very strange because, for example, here, like, I'm talking to you, I don't know that much about you at all. And you talk to me about me. It's a very strange form of relationship, so... But that's what the creative process is about, so you sort of share something with the world, and then the world experiences it.
Is that maybe why the title's Dior and I? And maybe who that I could be you, it could be anyone maybe?
Yes, I think it could be anyone that is involved in the creative process. Obviously, it was a reference to Christian Dior himself because his autobiography was called Christian Dior and I. So I chopped off the Christian to make it more today, which is like Dior, the name, almost like the brand is also the legacy, is also the ghost of Christian Dior. The I could be Raf because he has a very special relationship with the house and with the founder. He couldn't even finish reading the autobiography because he felt like it was too close. It was too close to home. He felt like he was reading about himself in the words of Christian Dior. And it's also about the seamstresses, when they talk about their relationship to Dior, the seamstress who says that she's a little baby Dior because she started at 18 at the house and she's learned everything there. Or Lily, another seamstress, who says that when she was in boarding school with the nurses, with the nuns, she always knew that she was going to work for Dior because she felt like she had met Dior in a past life. So I felt like everyone had such a very strong emotional bond with either the house or the man himself. I felt like that was the most appropriate title for a film that tried to be an ensemble film, not just about Raf, but about everyone involved in the creative process.
Did you get to know the house first or Raf, and how did that come about?
I knew the house first. I had a contact at the house, and we were discussing the idea of documenting the arrival of a new designer several months before Raf was actually appointed. And I was just crossing my finger the whole time, like, I hope Raf is the one. I hope Raf is the one. I honestly don't know what I would have done if it had been like someone else, because I was just fascinated by what I had read about him. I didn't know him personally. I didn't try to make contact. I guess I didn't really know anyone who knew him. I'm not really I don't have too many fashion connections. That sounds kind of strange after doing 3 films about fashion, but I'm more of a filmmaker. I don't spend my time in the fashion world. But I was patiently waiting for him to be announced as the designer, and when he was, I jumped on the phone and I called the people at Dior and said, like, when can I come? Can I can be on the plane tomorrow. And they said, well, don't jump on the plane because Raf is not keen on the idea of a documentary, and actually he refuses. And so I proposed to write a letter explaining what my process was and what my vision for the film was, and a letter to Raf. And when he got it, he replied, I can't say yes, I can't say no completely, but why don't you come for a trial period 1 week? So that's when I met him. I was already behind the camera and he was entering the room to meet the seamstresses, and I meet him through the lens of the camera the first time, which is so intense for a filmmaker, because normally you have weeks, if not months, of warming up your characters to be on camera, to get them comfortable and everything. And we had none of that. It was just like thrown in the middle of this situation.
That's nuts. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. So talk to me about getting to know him then. I mean, he does open up to you guys, and
yeah.
I mean, he brings you into his car. I think that's one of my favorite scenes, is the driving.
Right. That was actually kind of a turning point in getting to know him. But even after the first scene of him meeting the seamstresses, he came up to me, and he was very curious, very different from the public image that is usually projected of him, of someone shy or reserved. He's in real life, he's actually quite the opposite of that. He's very warm, very passionate. So he wanted to know everything about my favorite films, my favorite filmmakers. I have to admit I lied a little bit because I had read that he loved Todd Haynes. I didn't lie actually, but because I love Todd Haynes and Safe was one of my favorite films. And so I said that immediately, and that sort of broke the ice. He was like, he had a big smile on his face, and then we talked about just what I was going to do, and like he told me his concerns about being on film and why he was reluctant. And that's when I started to understand a little more who he is. You know, he said, I'm afraid that if I participate in a documentary, then I become a public person, and then people will put me on a pedestal, and then when I meet someone, it's going to be very hard to have a normal conversation. And he doesn't want that in his life. He's someone who's thrives on conversations, dialogues, you know, where he knows the person in front of him, he gets to know them, there's an exchange going on. And he felt like publicity was gonna alienate that, you know. And I really respect that. So we talked about the ways that my project could fit within this this sort of principle that he had. And I told him that I was interested in doing an ensemble piece, not something that was focused solely on him. And I told him that, you know, I wasn't interested in putting him on a pedestal. And on the contrary, I was going to put him very much on the same level as the seamstresses. And for me, it was about the creative process, and everyone involved deserved to have a voice. So I think, you know, he didn't really say exactly what changed his mind as to allow me, but I think it was a slow process of just getting to know each other and understanding that as human beings we're sort of on the same wavelength.
It's interesting because we get to know like Florence and Monique and even Peter. I think his character is a very interesting person, and his dynamic of kind of being the in-between.
Yeah.
What was it like getting to know each person individually, and when those tense moments happened, like when Flo had to go to New York, was that some of the toughest shots? I mean, did anyone ever just say, stop shooting?
Yes, actually, Raph said that before we started that scene. It was very tense because it was the first time that he was discovering the toiles, which are the first 3D renderings of the dresses that he's designed. And he was very nervous. Everyone was very nervous. How was he going to react? Did they do well? Did they interpret in the wrong way what he was doing? So I remember Raph calling out my cameraman a couple of times. And that hadn't happened before. You know, as a cameraman, you need to be very, very discreet and sort of almost invisible. And for some reason, Raph that day was much more aware of the camera, and I guess my cameraman, Gilles Picard, was crossing the line a little too much. And so we got called out a couple of times, so we stopped filming for a little bit. I decided to go behind the camera in order to sort of reassure Raph, because also he didn't know my cameraman very well. He knew me much more. So it was incredibly tense, and the lucky part is that we had a microphone on him. So we were able to keep rolling the sound, even though we weren't really filming everything. We were sort of filming from the back of the room, because we were sort of in the doghouse for a little moment, and that's when the scene happens where Raf decides to have a confrontation with the staff at Dior about his dresses not being ready, and I can't remember if when I shot that, I was actually listening to the sound. I think my cameraman had taken over sound, so he was listening to the sound. I was shooting sort of blind, not really knowing what was going on behind that closed door. So it's only at the end of the day when we watched the dailies that we realized what that scene was.
Such an amazing scene. It's such a, I mean, you kind of completely understand where he's at, but you understand, the Dior side. They have to make money. It was fascinating.
I think it was important for us to show everyone's side. Yeah, and like Jean Renoir, the French filmmaker, said something about the rules of the games, which was kind of an inspiration for this film. He said, "What's terrifying in life is that everyone has their reason." And it's true. Like people act a certain way because they have their reason. It's like you can't necessarily say this one is wrong, this one is right. They just have a different agenda, and they just have a different point of view. And it was kind of important to portray the different point of views and not judge who's right, who's wrong. That's how we decided to edit that scene.
I'm curious. You worked with a very good editor, Julio Perez.
Oh yeah, he's amazing.
Comparing the archival footage you got of Dior compared to obviously what you've captured with those 8 weeks, what was the editing process like for you guys?
We always wanted to transform the archival footage into something else, because all of this archival footage comes from little news segments, from the 50s, with a funny voice saying, like, at the house of Christian Dior, there are 100 seamstresses. We were not interested in that. We wanted to have a mood and a style that suggested a ghost, a spectral sort of quality. So we transformed the footage, we slowed it down. We took just the shots that were almost abstract, and we liked the shots of just Christian Dior himself, or abstract shots of a shadow. That's how we worked. It was the editing process was very long, and I was so lucky to have Julio by my side, who I wanted to collaborate with because he comes from very much of a different background than, he's not in the fashion world. He's not really into documentary. He has some documentaries, but I think he's more known for his fiction work. That's what I like. I kind of wanted to take this film into more towards fiction. I was, even when I was shooting, I remember telling my cameraman, shoot it like fiction, shoot it like a Michael Mann thriller.
Well, I'm curious then, when those two elements combined or collide, if you will, it seems like the moment Raf visits Dior's home, the pink home, what made you decide that's when we'll pick up the ghost specter as the voiceover with Raf there? I think that was one of my favorite scenes. It seemed like the combining of the two worlds. Was that always intended, or?
It was always intended to have the voiceover be, it's the ghost of Dior, and that the dramatic premise that we talked about with Julio was Dior has a long shadow, and Raf needs to step out of that shadow in order to find himself. So in the beginning of the film, we relied on Dior's voiceover a lot in order to feel that presence, that sort of overbearing presence that needs to be overcome by Raph. And we decided to gradually reduce the importance, have that voice sort of fade away as Raph is finding his way creatively, you know. And so towards the end of the film, it's almost inexistent. It comes back one last time to sort of give Raph almost like his approval to go on and present his collection. You know, it's like when Raph is on the rooftop right before the show. That's the last time you hear the voice of Dior, and the voice of Dior is much more what's the word? I mean, it is much more friendly in a way, or sort of like friendly towards Raph, and sort of towards also his struggle with his public image. You know, he sort of, Dior comes to terms with the idea that you need a public image, and that's what makes the whole fashion world possible. And so Raph has also that moment of coming to terms with that. So, you know, it was a balance. You know, in the beginning we didn't have I remember the first cut, there was not enough Dior towards the end, and we missed that, and so we worked on keeping that voice, that dialogue with Dior, with the voice of Dior alive throughout the film.
It works wonderfully. I mean,
Thank you.
It does seem haunting, and you're not sure where his state of mind is at the beginning. You're not sure if he's angry or... It's very fascinating. I'm curious, what was it like shooting the actual show? The chaos that must have been like, just where you and your cameraman could be, you know, the security issues, the different rooms, the celebrities. Just that must have been insane.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I had the support of my team, which was great, because I had a producer, Chiara, who was coordinating with Dior in order to find out what their plan is, so we can plan around it in terms of, you know, where we could set up, where the camera was going to be, where we could put our cameras, because it was very important for us to have a different point of view. We didn't want to use their footage. And then working with my DP for the show, which was a different DP. He was someone who was much more used to fashion in a way, but I told him, don't shoot it like a normal fashion show. I'm not interested in... It has to be different. It has to be something that you won't find on YouTube, you know, and a different sort of point of view. So he came up with the slow motion. He was like, well, we've got these big cameras, the Red Epic. They do slow motion, so I turn it on. You'll tell me if you like it or not. And it turned out to be, you know, amazing. I told him to lower the camera slightly so that it wouldn't be that human point of view, but slightly lower, more like a sculptural, sort of statuesque sort of point of view on the girls. So yeah, I mean, it was the biggest crew that I ever had in my entire life. You know, we had like, I don't know, 15 people in our crew, and yet I didn't have to like... It was nice because I didn't have to control everything. Everyone sort of knew what they were doing, and I was more preoccupied with my camera. I was shooting that day Raph, so I was backstage with Raph, and I was up on the roof with Raph. So it was nice that everyone was just so good on that day that I didn't have to worry. I could focus on just Raph Simmons and how he was feeling that day.
I'm curious that, I mean, Raph gets very emotional, and that rooftop scene is amazing, capturing that moment. Did he ever look at the edit and be like, I don't know if I want to show this? Because it does reveal a whole side of him I don't think people realize.
Mm-hmm. He looked at the final film. He never mentioned that scene, or for that matter any other scene. He just cried. he just cried again watching the film, and I think he didn't expect that level of intimacy. Actually, he told me since then that he doesn't even remember me being on the roof. He remembers that moment, but he doesn't remember me being on the roof, which is kind of strange because I looked into his eyes right before he sort of breaks down, which I rarely do. I usually look at the viewfinder. I don't break the moment, but there was something about that moment that was so intense, and I made eye contact with him, and he made eye contact with me, and you see it in the film, and then he breaks down. There was something that, I don't know. We were very much in the same place, creatively, on a very different scale, because he's creative director at Dior, and I'm just in charge of my small crew. But this is my first film as a solo director. I've worked on 2 other documentaries in various roles, and I had to sort of step up my game for this one. And now I'm having to do interviews for the first time. There's a whole publicity thing around it that I never had to do before. And he's been a fashion designer for a long time, and for 20 years, and he's achieved a lot. And now he had to step up his game at Dior, in front of a lot of cameras, and with a new team and everything. So there were just so many parallels, I feel like, that helped me understand what he was going through.
What was it like showing it at Tribeca in New York audiences? I mean, I think Dallas is a very strong fashion community, but I mean, New York obviously has a very strong fashion community. What was their reaction, and what was the experience like for you?
Tribeca was amazing. I mean, it was that's where I live. Also, I live in New York, and the audiences there were so warm. I mean, there were people lining up, for rush tickets, and there was just a strong demand to see the film. So it was kind of great, and a lot of my team was there. A lot of the people who helped me during the post-production, and my parents were there. And it was a very big moment. I was terrified for 2 weeks before, and because I had to speak in public for the first time, and do all that. And, but the reception has been, really great ever since then. And I'm discovering the film through other people's eyes also. People really appreciate the humanity of the film, and it's something that I didn't really think about. I just made a film about people that I liked and that I admired, Raph and the seamstresses and all that, and now people get to experience it. So I get to sort of also rediscover the film.
I'm curious on a visceral level. Did you ever feel the presence of Dior in the house, and also the smell of the roses? Can you tell us what that must have been like? Because visually, it's one of the most stunning things I think we've ever seen.
The roses were incredible. It was not just roses; it was orchids, and it was overwhelming. Not just the smell. I mean, the smell took over the whole street. You could really smell. This was a lot of flowers, and they actually crashed the flower market, for that whole month in Europe, because you couldn't find any more orchids, you couldn't find any more roses in Europe. They had snatched everything. And as far as what was your first question? I can't remember.
The ghost. Did you ever feel the presence? Yeah.
Well, the ghosts. Yeah, that night that we shot we shot in the atelier at night and projected old images, archival images onto the new dresses. That was very eerie, and we spooked like one of the assistants who stayed late, like because we were doing the night watch with the guard, and suddenly we hear like a big scream. It's like one of the assistants who was still there at like 1 a.m. was freaked out because she didn't hear us coming. I mean, the ghost was always a larger metaphor for me, you know. I'm interested in the creative dialogue that one can have with the past, you know, because we all create with the past, you know. You don't create in a vacuum, and you're always influenced by other people, and it's almost like a collaboration, you know. So I was interested in exploring that idea, you know, and the idea that the ghost of Dior was still present sort of symbolized all of that, you know.
I'm curious, the USA Film Festival is the oldest festival in the state of Texas and one of the oldest in the country. What's it like being able to bring it here right before the film launches? And also, I know you haven't been in Dallas long, but what do you think of the city so far? Are there things you want to see in the city while you're here for a few days? Or
yeah, I was just thinking a few minutes ago I want to go check out some museums. I think it's really nice to come back to a festival, because I've been on the festival circuit, you know, right after Tribeca for about 6 months, and it's great. The festival atmosphere is just so nice, you know. You just you get to meet people and discover a new town. The release is much more business-like, you know, so it's like come in, go to LA, do 2 days of press, then do a premiere. You know, it's not the same. I think also film festivals are all about film, and I'm very much a film lover, so it's a treat for me. Dallas is, I mean, it's my first time in Dallas, so I'm excited to be here. I've seen, I mean, Joellen was taking me around last night through the city center, and like the architecture is kind of amazing. And we also drove by the street corner where Kennedy was shot, and it's very strange to see it after seeing it in so many movies and footage and, you know, archival footage. Yeah.
kind of eerie, making...
Yeah, it's very eerie.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, Rafe. I called you Rafe. You're so connected to him. God, Fred. Fred, what's up next for you then? I mean, you've been kind of immersed in some Valentino to Diana to Dior. Are you going to keep with that trek, or are you looking to take a switch?
I'm looking to take a switch. Yeah. I'm working on a narrative film now. I'm developing this story that takes place in London that it's not a documentary. So I'm doing that, but at the same time I have a lot of other ideas, including documentaries. So I don't know. It's too early to decide, you know. I have like several projects. We'll see which one actually comes to reality.
Well, I'm glad you made the jump into the director's seat. This movie was amazing, and thank you for coming to Dallas, Fred. Thank you
Thank you very much.